conservative writer Matt Lewis. He's out with a new piece of his own for the Los Angeles Times titled "The Window to Declare Success in Iran is Closing." Matt, it's great to see you. I think your piece is so stark because it lays out right at the top that one of the ways this could end is this. You know the drill. Announce that we've set back Iran's nuclear programs a decade, pounded their navy into submission, and turned the Ayatollah into a fine mist. Mission accomplished. But the concern is that by doing that, the mission is not actually accomplished, right? Walk us through this.
Right. Yeah, look, so I wrote that piece. I came up with the idea probably Wednesday, wrote it Thursday. It went online Friday. It went, the print edition came out Sunday, and I think it's already harder now than it was when I wrote it to have any sort of a graceful, unembarrassing exit that doesn't have a lot of negative consequences. But look, this is a war of choice. This is a war that didn't have a clear justification. There was no clearly defined mission. The American public there was no national consensus of this, and there was no exit strategy. So it's sort of now like that Tanya Tucker song, it's a little too late to do the right thing now. And so really, I think the question is, what do you do now? I think that it is still possible for Donald Trump and for America to get out of there. It would obviously be embarrassing. There obviously will be some consequences. But let's compare it to the other options, which I think are to stay. Then we have to ask ourselves, what are we really there for? Is it regime change that we're after? Is it an unconditional surrender? I mean, these are religious zealots who the leader of the country just had his father murdered, assassinated, let's say. From his standpoint, maybe the former. Are they going to give up? Are they going to be willing to just negotiate with Donald Trump? I think he sees the world very much as a negotiator. They are now fighting just for survival. That is how they define success and victory, is from survival. And so I just think there is a big threat if we stay and try to accomplish this mission, which, by the way, we never really were sold, we never really bought into, of a quagmire developing and just getting sucked into yet another Middle Eastern war that goes on and on.
You could barely buy into it because the administration never told you what they were trying to sell here. I mean, there was no period of time, be it at the State of the Union mere days before this campaign began, or at any other point where Trump tried to use his megaphone on social media or otherwise to make the case for why this incursion had to happen in the first place. And I think that's where your other piece for The Hill from earlier this month sort of sets the tone. It's clear the president is thinking about legacy. I think what's surprising for those of us who have covered him for so long is that the legacy is one of interventionism in this second term after 10 years of campaigning on being the exact opposite of that with an America First agenda.
Absolutely. I think people are scratching their heads wondering, why is it that Donald Trump, someone who really ran for president and succeeded in 2015 and 2016 of going against adventurism and nation building and all of this stuff, why would he do this in Iran? First of all, he probably wouldn't go into Iran. Second of all, he wouldn't stay. He knows the perils of this sort of thing, of nation building and of boots on the ground. Why would he do this? And so there's multiple theories. You know, obviously there's this sense maybe that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu kind of goaded him into it. There's obviously a sense that he loves anything unilateral, right? Executive orders, military action. He doesn't have to get Congress to approve, really. They don't need to actually declare war. He can just do this without them. He likes it. I think there's also a sense that this is a boomer war, that he's stuck in the 80s in a way that maybe the new generation of right-wing folks are not. But I think maybe the most compelling one is that he is now in the legacy building phase of his life and his presidency. That this is about doing things that are consequential, that will make it impossible for him not to be remembered in the history books. Some of this, I think, includes simply naming buildings after himself, construction projects, ballrooms, things like that. But some of it, I think, involves, he knows that presidents who are considered great are oftentimes involved in wars, oftentimes involved in expanding our territory. I think that played into the desire to acquire Greenland. And then I think the Venezuela thing went so well that he thought, oh, this is easy. This is a way that I can do something that Barack Obama couldn't do, that Ronald Reagan couldn't do, that Jimmy Carter obviously couldn't do. And so here we are. I think it's narcissism.
Because as we enter the legacy building phase, we did really risk forgetting about President Trump. So he had to name buildings after himself and start wars. I mean, if you take that and carry the logic, what is the remembrance likely at this point when you look at the Iranian war, which, again, when you don't lay out what success looks like, it leads to confusion in what you should make of a legacy of it. I mean, do you think that this is a decision that ages well if we're thinking through a legacy lens?
Obviously, we have to see how this turns out. I mean, one could argue that if this were done right, that if it were possible to take a regime like Iran and remove their threat of nuclear weapons, possibly have a better regime, that is a huge legacy. And now if Cuba were to fall, you start to understand the vision. It might be delusional, but the vision that he had, it's not irrational, but it has to go right. Otherwise, it's Vietnam. And then you're, LBJ, who had his whole domestic policy undone by his foreign policy. And so there's no guarantee, obviously, that being involved in something like this will make you well remembered.
I think that is such an important distinction you make between delusional, not irrational, and yet walking that line in between is so fine and the stakes are so high. Conservative writer Matt Lewis, thank you for coming on, offering your view. We appreciate it.